Hello and welcome to another episode of the Tonic for Lunacy. I'm your host, Donna, and today we're going to be talking about family shadow mapping. All right, so what the heck is family shadow mapping? So I'll tell you how this started. So in my human design shadow training group, we were talking about deconditioning. And we started talking about how, well, we always talk about how our childhood obviously affects who we are and how our trauma affects who we know ourselves to be. And our trauma responses become sort of like our identities because we identify with them so much that we're like, oh my God, this must be who I really am. So we wanted to do a little bit of digging in terms of our beliefs and how our parents and our upbringing may have shaped our beliefs. So what I started doing is family shadow mapping. And essentially what it is looking at our caregivers charts, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever you spent the most time with, siblings, and seeing how their chart affects us. Now, you might be asking yourself, but Donna, how is this different from a composite chart? And I'm going to tell you how it's different. A composite chart is 1 + 1 = 3, right? We take one person's chart, another person's chart, we put it together, and we look at what it would look like together. Who are these persons? Who are these people as one unit? 1 + 1 = a third energy. What is this third energy? My family shadow mapping is different than that. And I'm going to show it to you. So if you're listening on the podcast, you might want to switch over to YouTube. I will post a link. And if you are watching on YouTube, then yay, do nothing. Okay, so first thing I did was I ran my family's charts. Now, a lot of people don't have the correct birth time. I know that genetic matrix right now has time range, I think they're calling it, where they will literally show you different ranges in time and the different charts that are associated with it. So you can use that. I would really say use your judgment, use your intuition if you don't have birth time. You also don't have to have this, but it's easier and it's more fun. And we love human design fun. So let's say this is my mom's chart, okay? And I want to do some shadow mapping. So what I'm going to do is instead of looking at her chart combined with my chart, I'm going to take her chart alone and I'm going to make some notes on it. Do I know how to actually do that? I believe I do. Okay. So we're going to take some actual notes as if I was about to do a reading for this person. Okay. The first thing that I look at is she a single definition? And she is. So next thing I want to look at is undefined center. Now we have this ego here, which tells me that there might be some issues with low self-worth, deserving, trying to prove yourself. This is all not self energy. So I'm going to make that note here. Now I have a defined solar plexus, and this is meaningful because I'm undefined. So it's meaningful to me. And what I might say is huge emotions, roller coaster, potentially. And this may or may not be my mom's chart. I'm just using it as an example. Huge emotions, roller coaster energy. Did this person learn how to regulate? Do they know how to feel their feelings? With the defined solar plexus, we also run into some, you know what, I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, so I'm going to put that note here. Now I want to look at her conscious moon, gate 43, the gate of We've got some insights, we have some opinions, we have some deep inner knowings, but it's in an undefined center. So for me, that says that this person might, we also have the undefined throat, speak out of turn, share when their opinion is not wanted or needed. Now, whenever I do things like this, whenever I start to look at like self-worth, or I start to look at having huge emotions, I always scan the chart for more things. So you saw me do that with 43, how I also looked at the throat. Now I also have an open crown and an open ajna. So I'm also undefined crown and undefined ajna. So I'm also looking at where are they taking in information from others? Could they have been highly conditioned in the way they think and perceive the world? Now, this comes into play when you know what you know about your grandparents. A lot of times we know how our parents were raised. So what do we know about our grandparents? So I know for sure that her life was conditioned by her parents' lives. Her parents came from different country, her dad from Germany, her mom from Poland, right before, literally escaped right before the Holocaust. So how might those fears, those perceptions of life, all of those thoughts and that energy that's deep within them, in them, how might that have affected the way that her openness, her undefined centers behave, right? So I want to consider all of that as well. I want to consider her unconscious Mars, right? So we have gate 63, and it is in line 5. I'm going to be honest with you with this unconscious Mars gate 63.5. I go directly to my shadow report, like my own words in my shadow report, instead of having to like literally redo it every time I look at it, every time I do somebody else's chart. So let's see, gate 63, doubt. So as the shadow genius, you are a pattern weaver. Through doubt and discernment, your shadow genius, well, this is her potential. So let's skip that and get into like the core wound. Through the core wound of doubt, the not self can activate the fight nervous system response of mental anxiety. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to make a note of that. Mental anxiety, fight or flight response. The anxiety wants answers to all the questions. I mean, if this does not describe every phone call I've ever received from my mother, I don't know what does. So it needs answers. All the questions. Let's see, the human mind is not designed to be certain of anything, blah, 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 blah. Potential generational wounds. It's weird to think that worry or doubt or the need to search for certainty can be generational, but our ways of thinking can absolutely be passed down through our DNA and through conditioning. Self-doubt can be contagious. What sort of anxieties, doubts, or even suspicions might you be holding on to that are not yours, but are simply conditioned? Exploring the themes in your life. Okay, so we know that certainty, and also we have this undefined ajna. Remember I said that I look at, once I zone in on one thing, like certainty. Now I'm going to look at all of the places where she might have suffered from a lack of certainty, where that became a fear, right? That became a fear of stability, a need for safety and survival. So certainty, I need to know that I'm good enough. Certainty, I need to know that I have attention, that I'm being heard. Certainty in having my questions answered, in knowing what the future holds. Otherwise, if I don't know the unknowable, then who's going to know? And now I'm unsafe, right? And you have to remember that a lot of our parents came from a time of war and instability and a lack of resources. So all of these things have to be considered, okay? So we're starting to build a really great story around this person and who we know that she could be in the not self. And remember, this is not self. So I'm not talking about all of the great, amazing, beautiful qualities. That's for another day. I'm doing shadow mapping. I want to know where all of this person's shadows, how they all play together. And then I can look at how they might affect me. Because guess what? We think that we're only being conditioned by our undefined centers. But our undefined centers affect our definition. Let me say that again. The conditioning in our undefined centers affects our definition, which means that our definition becomes dysfunctional energy based on the conditioning that we have taken in from our undefined centers, from our openness, anywhere where we're open, right? So none of these elements work independently. And I think that's a really important human design facet that we don't talk about enough. That this is the problem that I have with a lot of human design readers, where you come to them and they just look at the gate and they're like, oh, well, your sun is in here, so this means that. And your Saturn is here, so this means that. Like, yes, but show me how it all works together. Synthesize the shit out of my chart, because nothing is happening independently in our charts or in our lives, right? Like, we don't live in a vacuum, although I wish we did. Okay, so I have the certainty here, or lack of certainty. Now, I love unconscious Mars because it's the core wound, it's our generational trauma, but then it also can give us our shadow genius. So in my shadow report, I give you all of that. If you want to run a shadow report for your parents, that's kind of genius. And I love that idea. I'm so glad you came up with that. If you do that, please let me know. I would love to talk to you about it. But I also want to take a look at the core wound line. So we have line 5, and line 5, as we know it, receives a lot of projections. Also, she's a 3-5. So anyway, she's going to receive a lot of projections, a lot of expectations. This is what you should be like. This is who you are. This is what we need from you. This is how you should show up. This is what you should do with your life. And these expectations with an undefined ego start to become so convoluted where you're like, I need to be this in order to be good enough. I need to look like this in order to be good enough. I need to behave in this way in order to be loved. When in reality, those things are not connected, right? So line 5 here, which you will also find in the shadow report, is guilt. The theme of guilt is something everyone experiences, but like line 4 of rejection, it isn't as much about the theme of the wound, but rather what we do to try to protect ourselves from the feelings. Boom, right? Trying to protect ourselves from feelings. Again, we're going back to this defined solar plexus, and we're like, holy shit, well, has anyone taught you how to feel your feelings? Protection from own feelings. So now we're starting to look at this mental anxiety, right? Because I want to know the trauma response, and I'm looking at this mental anxiety, and I'm also looking at the trauma response of 43, which might also be fight or flight, right? And I will read about in a second in my shadow report. But what we're looking at is these themes are starting to come together. They're starting to come together and create a really great story. So let me continue with line 5. Did you learn that fight? Boom. Didn't we already talk about fight? That fight is the way to protect yourself. Do you constantly feel like you are fighting others' projections of who and how you should be? Are you fawning and compromising your truth because you feel guilty of how it may make others feel? Is it easier to just not rock the boat? Unlock this core wound and line by becoming aware of how it is you are showing up for you and allowing the shadow genius to emerge. Okay. So we know that we have some protection from their own feelings. We know that we have mental anxiety. We know that there is the fight trauma response for protection. Protection is survival. Whether it is, I feel like I'm not loved. I feel like I'm not worthy. I feel like I'm not deserving. Those are core needs. I feel like I don't belong. Those are core needs. Maslow's little needs, core need pyramid thing, right? That is right up there with death, right? It's survival. So who did this person need to be in order to feel worthy, feel like they belong, to be loved. And how do they use that fight response in order to protect themselves from their own feelings and from the mental anxiety that they cannot face, from those unanswerable questions? Do you see how I just did like a, sometimes I don't even realize I'm doing it, but just like a little synthesization of this person's entire chart, of the shadow elements, right, of their chart. We haven't even gotten into Pluto, but the shadows of the chart and how they might affect who this person is. Now, if obviously well, most times you know who your parents are, you know who they be, so you can kind of start to build on top of these with actual memories, with actual stories, and you can say, holy shit, I remember that one time where she was just like out here fighting and arguing and questioning and asking all these questions, and everybody was getting mad, and she just fell right into freeze because that comes after fight or flight, and I didn't understand it and I was so mad about it. But now I realized that that was her trauma response, and that's how she was trying to protect her own feelings, and that's how she was trying to protect herself, and that was how she was dealing with her uncertainty, with dealing with her mental anxiety. Now let's look at my chart, right? So these are just a few notes that we took, that we have here. I did want to look at 43 in terms of the trauma response because I don't remember off the top of my head. So I'm going to go to my shadow report of my conscious moon. Be aware of the deafness of this. Oh, this is good. How did I forget this is the gate of deafness? Be aware of the deafness of this gate, to only hear what it wants to and not remain open to others. Always test against your strategy and authority as well as your intuition. Secondly, your brave insights may be considered freakish and difficult for the collective to accept. This fear will bring mental anxiety if you are not grounded in yourself and your intuition. In the not self, you may be driven by the need to please others, say things they will understand, or ensure that you are liked by others. Again, we have that belonging, that really important belonging, but for sure deafness. And I can see all of this play out. And once again, we have mental anxiety. So when you're running your chart or your family's charts and you notice these things coming up over and over and over again, pay attention. Pay attention. So we've seen mental anxiety pop up 14 times, right? So we know that this is huge. Now, when I look, let me see if I can share both charts at the same time. I'm getting super excited about this. All right, desktop one. This is desktop one. Okay. So this is my chart. Ooh, and this is the other chart. Can I? Just trying to make this easier to see. Okay. So when I look at the two charts together, notice that I'm not creating a composite chart. I don't really care about the energy when the two are together. And here's why. One, because I already know, like I feel it, but also I don't think it's that important right now, because what I'm looking at is how might person A condition person B. And yes, I could look at where person A compromises person B, meaning her channels are greater than mine. They compromise my gates, or where her centers fill in mine, or where mine fill in hers, but I don't really care. I built this story here and I know a lot about this person. Now, if I think about myself coming into this world as a little duckling with nothing in my brain, right? Just this core wound that I'm pulling from past lifetimes, how might this person affect me? So we know that she suffers from mental anxiety, right? We know that there's mental anxiety that's present here that likely came from lifetimes before, from her parents, from the environment, from everything that this person has been through. Now, as a baby coming into this world immediately into mental anxiety is earth shattering, earth shaking, foundational shake. It's fucked up. Right? Like it's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a huge effect to a child's nervous system. Now, coming into this world as a fresh little duckling, into the roller coaster of an emotional wave, when you personally do not have one, is also foundationally shaky, right? And Ra talked about this a lot, how we can't, no matter what our wave is, we can't help but create that roller coaster for a newborn baby. So it's so important for us to learn how to regulate our feelings and feel our feelings when we're bringing a baby into the world. That's a lot of emotions. So we know that person A did not feel their feelings, did not regulate their nervous system. And here they bring this baby into the world and their foundation is immediately shaken. Now, I'm not even taking into consideration the environment, siblings, other people in the house, right? These are big things too. These are big things too. But I'm immediately looking at their fight response. And what this makes me think of is how I had a therapist tell me once, when are you going to put down the sword? And I was like, what? I am not a fighter. I am not a lover either, but I am not a fighter, right? I hate confrontation, undefined solar plexus, but I was wielding around this sword because everything felt unsafe. And I felt like I needed to protect myself from everyone and everything. And guess what? That fight response, not mine. I learned it. I was conditioned. I was conditioned to learn to fight, that I had to fight for myself. Now, self-worth. I have a defined ego. Somebody else's self-worth is not going to affect me, right? If anything, my confidence should affect them. But here's the thing. We don't live in a vacuum. Things don't happen independently, right? That low self-worth or the lack of deserving or the need to prove yourself that comes from the undefined ego does not just stay in the ego. It goes into the mind. It goes into the throat. It affects your feelings. It affects your definition. It affects your decisions. It affects how you move through the world, right? And the way that somebody else moves through the world is going to affect us when we are undefined, open, when we are living with them, when we look up to them. So while that might not affected my ego, it sure as hell affected my feelings, my thoughts, and therefore my behaviors, and therefore my definition. And this is key, right? This is the part that I want everyone to understand. And this is why I'm showing it to you like this, so that you understand that it's not about comparing undefined centers with defined centers, even though, yes, that's important, but it's also looking at a person holistically. Who are they? How has this impacted their thinking? How has this impacted their perspective? How has this impacted their behaviors? How they move through the world? And how have I, with my mirror neurons, mimicked that behavior, felt those feelings in my body, and as a child, not knowing it is not my own, taken it on and distorted my own energy, distorted my own definition in order to fit into this mold that I mirrored from somebody else. This is the deconditioning work. That's why the deconditioning work, the release the idea that I have low self-worth, that I'm not deserving, that I need to prove myself. I release that, right? Because it's not mine. But the real shadow work that I'm going to do is going to be on why. And it's going to be on what part of my self-worth have I diminished because I thought I had to prove myself? In what ways am I still trying to prove myself because I thought this was my energy? Right? So we want to be able to release these beliefs that are not ours. And here I'm looking at this person A's chart and I'm like, wow, this mental anxiety, this fight for survival, that's not mine. This fighting to belong, I can see how I took it on, but a lot of that is not mine. And I don't want it. I don't want to wield that sword anymore. I'm putting it down. I'm putting it down. So there's a few reasons why I'm really fucking digging this family shadow mapping thing. One of them is we need our traumas validated. We really need our traumas validated, our feelings validated, and to feel like we're understood. And when I look at this, I really feel like my shit's validated, right? And this is just like a very tiny piece, very tiny piece. Obviously, there's so much more. But you start to feel like what you've always known to be true, or how you've always felt like this is kind of fucked up that I have these feelings, that I have these thoughts, that I walk through the world and do this, is validated. And I want to start I want to start a trend. Okay. Let's hashtag it with I witness you. And send me your traumas. Send me your darkest, deepest shit. I will not share it. It will be anonymous. And all I will say back is I witness you. I see you. I validate you. I love you. I witness you. I forgive you. Right? It's like the fourth step of AA. I did this once with an ex-boyfriend, and I went through this laundry list of shit I must have read to him for an hour. And at the end, all he said was, I see you, I witness you something, I love you, I forgive you. And I just sobbed. That was literally all I needed. All I needed. So jump into my DMs, share your traumas. I will 1,000% keep it anonymous. I will never share it. I will never tell a soul. And I will witness you and I will validate you, and then pay it forward. Do it for someone else. Hashtag I witness you, whatever. I'm telling you, it is the most powerful medicine we can give ourselves and each other. So that's one thing why I love this work, is the validation that we will probably never receive from our family is right here. And I can learn how to give it to myself. I can learn how to witness it and allow this to be enough. And that takes work. And then second, it's understanding what beliefs I'm holding on to that are literally not mine. And it's not as easy as comparing definition and openness. It's building an entire story and recognizing where I've taken that energy on and how it's affected my definition. That's huge. That's huge. So all of this stuff I teach you obviously in the human design shadow training, which we're starting again in May. So if you want to join, let me know. I will drop a link to it. The shadow report, I will also drop a link to it. It is not a bad idea to download your parents' shadow reports. Actually, it's a fantastic idea. I'm so glad you thought of it. If you think about it, like if you get yours and your parents is $300, that's like 2 therapy sessions, and you can probably cure all your shit with just those reports. So for $300, I'd say not a bad deal. If you do end up doing it, please reach out and let me know. I'm dying to know what you think of this. Do you like this? Do you guys want to see more of these, more examples? Would love to know your insights, your questions. I will see you next time. Bye.